And then I just left the other ones because what am I going to do with that many? I just left them, and what happened was the worms moved in. And I've never seen so many worms. As these potatoes broke down, the starch broke down, and it was just like you stick your hand in there and it was like a worm bin, just completely wiggling full of worms. So that's another key to gardening, is like, okay, how many worms do you have? Well, that's a good question. It tells you a lot about what's going on in your soil. There's a friend of mine, Seth, that was raised in the background of wheat farmer, Hermiston area. They sprayed chemicals. Well, his uncle bragged to him. He's like, "There's not one worm in any of my fields." It's just showing you how many chemicals and how toxic the soil was. They never feed the soil with anything. So worms have to eat. And if we don't have any food for the worm, he's going to go elsewhere, or he's not going to exist. So that's kind of the key to mulch and bringing stuff in. And another thing is leaves are called leaves because you're supposed to leave them there. They feed the bacteria and the worms in the soil. And so the tree drops the leaves to benefit itself. And when we collect those, then all those deep nutrients that tree has brought up through its huge root system don't feed it back to the soil. It's like a cycle. If we don't continue the cycle, pretty soon we're in a dearth. We don't have it. It's like, oh, well, why is my lawn not doing very well? Oh, do you always pick up all the stuff off of it and you never put any natural stuff back on it?
So mulching is probably better.
Mulching is better, or just mowing it and just letting it sit on top and it'll dry out, and next time you go to mow, you'll chop it up and it doesn't really hurt anything. And and it actually feeds the trees that you have planted in your yard, because you're not just constantly taking. That's one of the problems with these farmers, is they're taking and taking and taking. What are they giving back? Like the Bible would say, every 7 years you let your soil rest. So the weeds and whatever can actually come up and die. Like weeds are good signs of our soil health. So if we're low in calcium, we might have lots of dandelions. Different weeds tell us different things. And everything has a reason, pretty much. So we have two piles of compost. And this is the one we're pretty much working on. That one's pretty much done. And it's not going to compost because it's dry out here and I haven't been watering it. But at any point in time I could water it and mix it. So I mix it with a small front end loader. And this is most of the cuttings that I've gotten from the grapes here on my recent pruning. So I still have another half a row to pick up from the cuttings. And all this seems to break down just fine in the compost. And it'll get probably 130 degrees in there once the bacteria and everything get going. So, and then I usually cover everything up with dirt. So I'll push this up here and then I'll roll the pile again. But since I've done that once already and I hadn't gotten this really started to compost, I'll probably just push this up and give it a good watering and keep it moist. And it'll start anything that's inside and that's covered will break down. And we can make compost all winter even if it's cold, because it creates its own heat internally. Any other questions you had?
No, I just like to see the process you're beginning, and you're not separating out anything in terms of. I've heard some people say that they separate weeds, they separate certain foods to ensure that they're not seeding their compost. But you're saying it's getting up to 130?
Yeah, probably.
Should be burning out most of that anyways, correct?
Yeah, and one of the things is you get seeds anyway, pretty much. So you still want to put a layer of mulch on the top. So we'll put the compost down, and then we'll put a layer of mulch on top. And then as long as that soil is covered, you know, this much or so, maybe that much, you're not really going to have a weeds problem. You know, you might get a few that come through, and you just have to be diligent and go through and, you know, find them when they come up before they get really rooted in.
And any happy surprises doing stuff like right over here we've got an entire squash, an entire watermelon. We get any happy surprises when composting and all of a sudden, hey, surprise, here's, you know, a new watermelon plant? Or
Sure. That's not a big deal. It's just like if you want it there, leave it. If you don't, get rid of it.
Well, you already showed us that a couple times out here today.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So, and a lot of those are just, they're not necessarily started from compost. They're just because we threw some old squash or you know, whatever, even watermelons, cantaloupe, it'll all just come up on from seed on its own. It's like you think about, okay, well, when is the right time to set out your tomatoes and your cucumbers? When it's time to plant your cucumbers into the soil? It's kind of like, okay, when you see those old tomatoes and cucumbers coming up, you probably should have had your stuff planted a week ago. You know, if you're transplanting things out, that's telling you that the soil is the right temperature for those seeds to germinate. So you don't necessarily have to have thermometers and all that. It's just like, okay, if you've got some cucumbers and whatever, you'll see them coming up from seeds and melons, and after you've grown things a bit, you know what things look like. Oh, well, you do have a little bit of trouble telling cucumbers and watermelons and cantaloupes apart before they get their true leaves. But obviously when you see the watermelon leaf as its second leaf, you know that that's a watermelon.
Well, that's all I have for this video. Bang around that bell icon if you want to be notified when new videos come out. Call us on the hotline if you have comments or questions and want to be featured in an upcoming video. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe. Check us out on the website, and we'll see you guys on the next one.